Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. In Kabul, U.S. envoy Zalmay Khalilzad and Afghan President Ashraf Ghani held discussions over ways to accelerate the Afghan peace process. According to the Afghan presidential palace, Khalilzad pledged that the U.S. will play an effective role in ensuring peace in Afghanistan. Khalilzad will also visit other regional countries besides Qatar, where intra-Afghan talks are ongoing. In Myanmar, ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi faces 2 new charges as she appeared in court via video link. She has been accused of using illegal communication equipment and causing fear and alarm. This is Suu Kyi's first public appearance since she was detained in a military coup on February the 1st. The hearing comes amid mass protests a day after a military crackdown left 18 people dead. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has been sentenced to 3 years in jail for corruption, with 2 of them suspended. He has been found guilty of trying to bribe a magistrate by offering a job in return for information about a criminal inquiry into his political party. He has denied any wrongdoings. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has blamed Iran for last week's blast on an Israeli ship in the Gulf of Oman. In an interview, Netanyahu said Iran is the biggest enemy of Israel and it is striking at it all over the region. The Iranian Foreign Ministry has rejected the allegations. The global number of coronavirus infections has crossed 114 million, with over 2.5 million deaths. The new variant of the virus, first found in Brazil, has been detected in the UK, but the British authorities have been unable to trace so far one of the 6 persons infected. Meanwhile, Pakistan has registered over 1,300 new cases and 36 deaths overnight as its toll nears 12,900. And in the Pakistan Super League, the match between Islamabad United and Quetta Gladiators has been rescheduled for Tuesday after a United player tested positive for coronavirus. The Pakistan Cricket Board said all other players of the 2 teams have tested negative. Those were the headlines and detailed stories. Right after a short break, stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. In Kabul, U.S. envoy Zalmay Khalilzad and Afghan President Ashraf Ghani held discussions over ways to accelerate the Afghan peace process. According to the Afghan presidential palace, Khalilzad pledged that the U.S. will play an effective role in ensuring peace in Afghanistan. Earlier, he met with Afghan High Council for National Reconciliation Chairman Abdullah. Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department said Khalilzad will also meet Taliban representatives. He will also visit other regional countries before flying to Qatar, where intra-Afghan talks are ongoing. The U.S. says it is ready to re-engage in meaningful diplomacy to revive the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. It comes after Tehran ruled out holding informal talks with the U.S. and the European powers on the deal.
The back-and-forth jousting between U.S. and Iran continues over Washington's probable return to the 2015 nuclear deal. Republican senators are mounting pressure on President Joe Biden to keep the U.S. out of the JCPOA. On the latest statement by Iran, White House spokesperson Jen Psaki said Washington is disappointed that Tehran has ruled out talks in the deal with major powers. Psaki said Washington will consult with China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom and Germany on the best way forward. However, Tehran argues it is not an appropriate time for the talks proposed by the European Union. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Saeed Khatibzadeh said the US must lift all of its unilateral sanctions on Iran first. Iran's Atomic Energy Organization has also warned the UN nuclear watchdog against a possible anti-Tehran resolution. Meanwhile, the organization's chief announced 2 nuclear centrifuges at Fordow and Natanz nuclear facilities.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has blamed Iran for the last week's blast on an Israeli ship in the Gulf of Oman. The ship was hit by a blast above the waterline that ripped holes in both sides of its hull. In an interview, Netanyahu said it is clear Iran is behind the attack. To a question, he said Iran is his country's biggest enemy and Israel is striking at it all over the region. Tehran has rejected Israel's claims, saying the allegations lack any credibility. Israeli defense officials have flown to Dubai to investigate the incident. Israel has launched a rocket attack striking southern parts of the Syrian capital Damascus. The Syrian army said the attack, second in less than a month, came from the occupied Golan Heights. The military said its air defense systems shot down most of the rockets. The latest strike is speculated to be in response to an attack on an Israeli-owned ship in the Gulf of Oman. The Iranian Foreign Ministry rejected Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's accusations. Over 400 European lawmakers urged their leaders to work with the US in order to stop Israel's illegal annexation of the occupied West Bank. In a letter, they said Tel Aviv's unilateral actions in Palestine undermine the possibility of peace. Addressed to the European foreign ministers, the letter says the Biden administration has a chance to correct the course. It added that the previous US administration left the conflict farther away from peace than ever. Biden has indicated his administration will restore US opposition against Israel's expansionist agenda. The international community and Palestinians have widely rejected Israel's bid to annex parts of the West Bank and the Jordan Valley. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has urged the Houthi rebels to find a way to end the war in Yemen. Addressing a UN humanitarian aid pledging conference, he said both Saudi Arabia and the Yemeni government are committed to find a solution to the conflict. Blinken said the rebels must stop their offensive against MARIB as a necessary first step to peace. He called on the Houthis to stop their cross-border attacks on Saudi Arabia. The Secretary of State also announced that Washington will provide $191 million in aid for Yemen. This comes as the UN launched an appeal for $3.85 billion to fund its response to the humanitarian crisis in Yemen. In Yemen, 5 civilians have been killed and 3 others wounded in an explosion at a house in Al-Hawak district. This comes as the battle for oil-rich MARIB province spreads to the port city of HODEIDAH. In a tweet, the UN mission strongly condemned acts of violence that breach the HODEIDAH agreement. The Houthis and the Arab-led coalition have blamed each other for the attack. However, the UN called on all the parties to refrain from attacking residential areas. Violence has escalated in Yemen, especially in MARIB, the government's last stronghold in the north. The air forces of Saudi Arabia and the United States have begun a joint training exercise in Saudi's city of Taif. In a statement, the Saudi Defense Ministry said the Dragon drills will focus on tactical interception and combat training. The Royal Saudi Air Force and the US Air Force will also undertake drills in counterattack and suppressing enemy air defenses. The Saudi authorities say the exercise is a continuation of cooperation between both air forces to maintain regional security. They also said the drills contribute to achieving compatibility and operational integration. In Myanmar, ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi faces 2 new charges as she appeared in a court via video link. This is Suu Kyi's first public appearance since she was detained in a military coup on February the 1st. She has now been accused of using illegal communication equipment and causing fear and alarm. She is already facing 2 charges of illegally importing walkie-talkies and violating Myanmar's natural disaster law. The initial charges carried sentences of up to 3 years in jail. Suu could reportedly be barred from running in future elections if convicted on the new charges. Meanwhile, protesters took to the streets again despite a military crackdown that left 18 people dead on Sunday. In Armenia, protesters have stormed a government building in capital Yerevan demanding Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan's resignation. Russian state media says the protesters held a demonstration in the lobby urging officials of the government departments to join them. The escalation in months-long political crisis comes after Pashinyan's mishandling of the 6-week-long conflict against Azerbaijan. The Prime Minister had last week condemned what he said was an attempted coup after the army demanded his resignation. Later, he dismissed the army chief, but Armenia's president refused to approve the order. In France, a former President Nicolas Sarkozy has been sentenced to 3 years in jail after he was found guilty of corruption. Prosecutors say Sarkozy bribed a judge in return for confidential information. But Sarkozy has denied any wrongdoing and said he was a victim of a witch hunt by financial prosecutors. He has 10 days to appeal the ruling. Sarkozy is the second former president in modern France to be convicted of corruption. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has hinted at a possible presidential run in 2024. Addressing a conference in Florida, Trump vowed to help Republicans trying to regain majorities. Speaking at the Conservative Political Action Conference in Orlando, Trump repeated claims he had won the 2020 election. The speech was his first major appearance since leaving the White House nearly 6 weeks ago. Trump aimed at disloyal Republicans, blaming them for trying to convict him for the Capitol riots. Trump also dismissed reports of what he was launching a third party, affirming his faith in the Republican Party, but singling out his rivals. The White House has dismissed Trump's speech as GOP politics, looking for a path forward. Russia says Twitter is maliciously violating the country's laws by not deleting content at the request of the government. Russia's communications regulator warned Twitter of a large fine if it is found guilty of failing to comply. Moscow cited banned material linked to suicide, pornography, and drugs. Roskomnadzor said Twitter has refused more than 2,800 requests for content removal since 2017. Moscow, in recent months, has taken steps to exert more influence over foreign social media platforms. Twitter has been fined in the past for breaching Russia's data laws. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The global number of coronavirus infections has crossed 114 million, with over 2.5 million deaths. Meanwhile, the new variant of the virus, first detected in Brazil, has been found in the UK, but British authorities have been unable to trace one of the 6 persons infected so far. More in this report.
The fear of new COVID-19 variants is making it hard for countries to lift restrictions and restore normalcy. But frustration and outrage against the curbs are mounting globally, with protests turning violent in some countries. In Brazil, people took to the streets to reject new restrictions as a dramatic surge prompted a lockdown in the capital, Brasilia. Canada has decided to keep its border with the U.S. closed for now until a significant number of vaccines are administered. A World Health Organization estimate shows that less than 10% of the global population has antibodies. In the U.S., Dr. Anthony Fauci has urged Americans to take the newly approved Johnson & Johnson vaccine or accept any of the 3 approved shots.
All 3 of them are really quite good, and people should take the one that's most available to them. If you go to a place and you have J&J and that's the one that's available now, I would take it. I personally would do the same thing. I think people need to get vaccinated as quickly and as expeditiously as possible. And if I would go to a place where they had J&J, I would have no hesitancy whatsoever to take it.
The Netherlands deployed anti-riot police as people gathered to protest against COVID measures in Amsterdam. The UK has recorded its lowest number of new cases in 5 months. However, authorities are concerned about increased transmissibility due to the Brazilian variant.
So this P1 variant is more transmissible than the original strains we saw from this virus. It is likely to have more antigenic change and therefore increase the risk of reinfections. And while we don't know the response to vaccine yet, we are concerned that we don't have spread of this that may impact on our vaccine program.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has also received his first dose of the homegrown vaccine. Meanwhile, researchers in Cambodia and Thailand have recently found a coronavirus in horseshoe bats that is closely related to SARS-CoV-2.
Pakistan has reported 36 more deaths from COVID-19 and nearly 1,400 infections overnight. The nationwide death toll approaches 12,900, while the infections tally is over 581,000. The Health Ministry says there are more than 22,000 active cases in the country. More than 546,000 people have recovered from the disease. Meanwhile, all schools across the country have restarted regular in-person classes from today. However, the Health Ministry has directed the schools to strictly follow the SOPs against COVID-19. These include the use of masks, physical distancing and hand washing. In Pakistan, British High Commissioner Christian Turner has called on Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa in Rawalpindi. The military's media wing said the two officials discussed matters of mutual interest. It added that the overall regional security situation and the developments in the Afghan peace process also came under discussion. The 4th International Pakistan Army Team Spirit Competition 2021 has commenced at the National Counter-Terrorism Centre, Pabbi near Kharia, Punjab. Pakistan Army's media wing said besides 8 teams of the Pakistan Army, teams from 8 countries will also participate in the competition. The competition is designed to test tactical skills in physical and professional domains as well as agility of the participating teams. The ISPR said teams from Jordan, Sri Lanka, Turkey and Uzbekistan will take part as participants. Meanwhile, Morocco, Indonesia, Kazakhstan and Tajikistan will participate as observers in the 3-day-long competition. The Indian Dalit community has joined forces with the farmers to protest against the BJP government's new farm laws. The marginalized community's representatives say the Dalits will now fight against the farm laws until they are withdrawn. Meanwhile, the head of the Government's Inquiry Commission has resigned after no meeting was held since its formation. Tens of thousands of farmers continue their agitation against the farm laws for the 94th straight day. Over 200 farmers have died during the ongoing protests, including who committed suicide in demonstrations. Thousands of people have taken to the streets in Haiti to demand an end to President Jovenel Moise's term in office. A dispute between Moise's administration and the opposition over the duration of the presidential term sparked the demonstrations. Protesters accused Moise of being a dictator backed by the US and the United Nations. They pledged to continue fighting in the streets to remove Moise from power. Haiti's opposition claims Moise should step down as his 5-year term in office expired last month. Moise won a disputed 2015 election, the result of which was later cancelled by an electoral council. Moise argues he took power after fresh elections in 2016 and has pledged to step down next year. 15 migrants have drowned after their boat capsized off Libya's coastal town of Zawiya. The International Organization for Migration says the victims were on a rubber boat carrying 110 refugees. A spokesperson said 95 migrants were intercepted and returned to Libya by the Coast Guard. Safa Masali said many of the survivors suffered burns from engine fuel and hypothermia, with some taken to hospital. This is the second shipwreck in just over a week, with migrants taking a dangerous sea journey to reach Europe. Italy's Mount Etna, the tallest active volcano in Europe, continued to erupt, spewing out volcanic ash around Catania. A blanket of ash and fragments of rock covered roads and buildings in the nearby town of Giare. The ash forced residents to employ brooms and dustpans to sweep volcanic residue from the streets. The activity began on 16th of February, lighting up Etna 7 times in the past days. The 3,330-meter high volcano often erupts but rarely causes damage. The last major eruption of Mount Etna was recorded in 1992. Russia has launched its space satellite AFGHAN to monitor the climate and environment in the Arctic. The launch came amid a push by the Kremlin to expand the country's activities in the region. In a tweet, the head of Russia's Roscosmos space agency, Dmitry Rogozin, said the satellite has reached its intended orbit. It was launched from Kazakhstan's Baikal Cosmodrome by Soyuz rocket. The AFGHAN will have a highly elliptical orbit that passes over northern latitudes to monitor the regions for lengthy periods. In Brazil, some of the beaches have been covered by the tsunami of trash, leaving coastlines engulfed from plastic bags and bottles to children's toys and dead fish. Environmentalists called for action as waves of plastic pollution are spoiling the beaches. More in this report.
In the spectacular Rio de Janeiro, the soundtrack has changed. It has gone from samba rhythms to the clash of glass and plastic objects. This is the result of an alarming level of pollution. According to the Oceans Brazil report, the South American country throws some 325,000 tons of plastic into the sea. A local environmental activist explains the gravity of the situation as he tries to clean up some of the waste on Ilha Catalão.
These are the 8 million tons of plastic that reach the ocean each year, suffocating marine life and threatening the existence of man on the planet.
Gomez is the president of Brazilian Environmental Protection Group, and his campaign to save Rio's beaches has attracted global attention.
70% of all this plastic here on the beach is made up of single-use plastic. From disposable containers to plastic cups and food containers, we can change that. We can buy food in a restaurant that doesn't use plastic containers. We can reduce the consumption of plastic within our homes and within our own lives.
Brazil trails only behind the United States, China, and India as the world's largest producer of plastic trash.
Along with every other area of life, the ongoing pandemic has influenced art as well. German artists portrayed their art by getting into air-filled bubbles to show the impact of social distancing during the pandemic. More in this report.
Keeping your social distance in a bubble. That is what several dancers of the Stuttgart ballet group did by dressing up in classical costumes and jumping into PVC bubbles. They were performing for German artist Florian Mannert's art photography project called Social Distance Stacks.
My
work deals very much with current social events and often also with problems that have certain insolubility for me, of which I stand as an artist. And then, of course, my thinking apparatus begins to think about how I can make the situation visible, how I can capture that. And of course, the lockdown and this pandemic situation is a very stressful situation for all of us, for art and me as an artist as well. And so, of course, the motivation was there. I want to make a work that deals with that.
The artist set up dancers, musicians, and actors in air-filled bubbles, hoping to show the impact of social distancing during the pandemic.
The effort for this whole series of the social distance stacks is very big. One needs a tremendously large team in the background to get it all done. And there is also the problem that if the bubble is as hermetic as this one, it has a certain amount of body heat. So we only have a window of 10 to 15 minutes, not to mention the air is also getting less and less inside the bubble. After all, no air gets into the bubble.
According to Mannert, the photo shoot was challenging, but worth the effort. The photo shoot is a representation of human isolation amid the pandemic and during the times otherwise.
Drama Nomadland has won the top movie honor at Hollywood's Golden Globes in a mostly virtual bi-coastal ceremony, while British royal drama The Crown has swept the television honors. More in this report.
Some of the best content on television and cinema were honored at the 78th edition of the Golden Globes award show. Like everything else, the coronavirus pandemic also affected the awards season. The ceremony took place from both Los Angeles and New York, with nominees virtually taking part from locations around the world. Nomadland movie won top honor at the awards, while British royal drama The Crown has swept the television honors. The Crown dominated the ceremony with 4 awards, including Best Actress for Emma Corrin and Best Actor for Josh O'Connor.
I just want to say I'm very lucky to be able to work in this period, and there are so many people who are unable to work and are alone and isolated, and I hope that we can all collectively put mental health at the forefront of our mind. Thank you so much.
Netflix The Queen's Gambit was named the best television limited series. Anya Taylor-Joy's depiction of a young chess champion fighting drug and alcohol addiction was nearly flawless.
I learned so much. I'm so grateful, and thank you to the audiences that have watched it and supported the characters. It meant the world, so thank you so much. Okay, thank you.
Mockumentary Borat's subsequent movie film won the award for Best Movie Musical or Comedy at the awards. Late actor Chadwick Boseman was honored posthumously with the Best Movie Actor award at the ceremony held in Los Angeles. 1970s heartthrob actor and activist Jane Fonda received a Lifetime Achievement Award at the ceremony.
It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. And now the business updates. The Wall Street stocks have opened higher as bond markets calmed after a month-long sell-off. The Dow Jones Industrial Average Index traded fractionally higher to start the week as rate fears ease. Nasdaq Composite traded over 1% higher, while the S&P 500 index also landed in the positive territory. Investor sentiments were encouraged after updates on the vaccine and stimulus fronts strengthened bets over a swift economic recovery. Meanwhile, oil prices have rebounded after progress on the huge U.S. stimulus bill. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. With the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.